Gentlemen, allow me to share a tale of betrayal and unfaithfulness. Let it serve as a reminder to all those who engage in deceit that their dishonesty will inevitably be uncovered, leading to dire consequences. At the age of 23, I entered into holy matrimony with a woman of 21. Our paths converged during our college years, and our bond intensified with each passing day. It soon became evident that destiny had brought us together, prompting our decision to unite in marriage. Once my wife completed her studies, I secured employment near my hometown, where my family owned a flourishing farm. Our parents oversaw the operations, employing a team of dedicated individuals. My brother and I, having grown up on the farm, actively participated in its activities. For reference, let's refer to my brother as Bill. He, being 3 years my junior, opted to forego higher education, choosing instead to work diligently as a laborer on the farm. Despite our father's attempts to involve him in managerial roles, Bill found solace in his daily labor and the fair wages earned. This became the sole purpose to which he devoted his life until tragically succumbing to cancer. Earlier this year, the farm extended over an expansive 700 acres, encompassing 3 houses. Our parents resided in the main house, nestled away from the main road, which also served as the farm's administrative office. Bill resided in a charming carriage house at the intersection of the driveway and the main road. Meanwhile, my wife, children, and I lived in a farmhouse located 3/4 of a mile away from my parents and brother. In a bid to expand the farm and secure our dwelling, my parents acquired the neighboring property through the family farm corporation. This resulted in all 3 homes being owned by the corporation, affording Bill and me the privilege of residing rent-free, an advantageous arrangement indeed. While our parents held official positions in the company, they structured it in such a way that both Bill and I would inherit the farm upon their passing. As per this arrangement, Bill was entitled to 45% while I received 55% of the inheritance. Due to my active role in managing the farm alongside my regular job, I was granted controlling interest, though no extra remuneration accompanied this responsibility. My family and I enjoyed the perk of residing on the property rent-free, with the understanding that I would eventually assume majority ownership. This setup fostered a harmonious family atmosphere, and we all cherished the time spent living there. As for my children, my eldest daughter is now 21 years old, followed by a 20-year-old son. We also have a 17-year-old son and our youngest daughter is 15. Life was truly blissful for each and every one of us. My marriage to Connie was blessed with abounding joy and love. Our children were exceptional, my career thrived, and the family farm flourished. Armed with this backdrop, a fuller picture of our lives emerges. Allow me now to delve into the incident that compelled me to share this account. Approximately 3 years passed. My brother received the devastating news of being diagnosed with cancer. Regrettably, he had always struggled with prioritizing his own well-being, only seeking medical intervention when his symptoms became unbearable. Tragically, by the time his cancer was detected, it had already spread to various parts of his body. Despite enduring a grueling journey of chemotherapy and radiation treatments, which took a severe toll on his health, he valiantly continued his work commitments. Earlier this year, the untimely loss of Bill left our entire family bereft, particularly myself. Bill regarded me highly, considering me his role model, and I was there to guide him through life's trials. One significant obstacle he faced, with my support, was his battle against alcoholism. He triumphed over this struggle for years before his passing. Additionally, he grappled with significant tax issues that required attention and resolution. I played a pivotal role in helping him navigate these challenges, as he often found even the simplest tasks overwhelming. Consequently, our bond grew immeasurably strong, and we became inseparable. My wife and children also held a deep affection for him. Although endearingly referred to as Crazy Uncle Bill, it is important to note that Bill was neither unintelligent nor indolent. Rather, he lacked the motivation and ambition to improve his circumstances. Over the years, Bill experienced countless romances with different partners, most often forged in bars and typically short-lived. However, there was one instance in which he was involved with a genuinely kind-hearted woman, and I held high hopes for their future together. Alas, his excessive drinking ultimately drove her away. My parents wholeheartedly embraced Bill, loving him unconditionally, just as they loved me. In his last will and testament, Bill appointed me as the executor of his estate, entrusting me with the responsibility of managing the distribution of his assets. The decedent owned various assets, including a life insurance policy, a modest checking account, and personal belongings such as a motorcycle and a truck. After his funeral, I found myself at his home, handling financial matters and sorting through the extensive paperwork spread across his kitchen table. As I organized the documents, I stumbled upon a statement from a bank outside our town. To my surprise, the account held an impressive balance of over $70,000. However, what truly startled me were the names listed as the account holders. While the account was in Bill's name, my youngest son, whom I'll call Joe, was designated as the beneficiary with the acronym POD, which stands for Payable on Death. I couldn't help but feel confused as I went through the details. Why had my brother set up the account this way? What was the reasoning behind naming Joe as the sole beneficiary, when he had a less significant bond with Joe compared to my other children? In fact, Bill had a stronger connection with my other kids than he did with Joe. My mind raced, desperately searching for answers, but none seemed logical. As I made this astonishing discovery, my initial instinct was to inform my wife and parents, but I decided to keep the news to myself for the time being. The following day, utilizing my role as the executor, I visited the bank to gather more information. It was there that I learned Bill had established the money market account shortly after Joe's birth, and had consistently made contributions to it every 2 weeks. Piecing these facts together, I couldn't help but focus on the undeniable connection between Bill and Joe, which deeply troubled and concerned me. Thoughts about the possibility of an affair between Bill and Connie, and whether Joe might be Bill's son, consumed my mind relentlessly. These thoughts left me in a state of anxiety and fixation. That night, overwhelmed by these thoughts, I returned to Bill's house, determined to find any clues that could provide answers. Hours passed as I meticulously searched through every file and document in the house. Finally, I stumbled upon something that would alter my life forever. Flipping it over, my world shattered as I discovered 2 old photos of my wife. In one, she was partially naked, and in the other, she stood completely nude, holding a beer. Shockingly, both pictures were taken in Bill's bedroom. Overwhelmed by devastation, anger, and confusion, I remained at Bill's house for several more hours that night, alternating between tearful despair and seething rage. Connie eventually called, inquiring about my whereabouts, prompting me to return home. At that moment, I chose not to confront her directly, as I needed time to contemplate my next course of action. Briefly, I even contemplated disregarding what I had discovered, but that notion was swiftly dismissed. How could I ever entertain such a thought? Those photos were from years ago, and my brother was no longer alive. I couldn't keep this revelation to myself. Thus, I made the decision to inform my parents about what I had unearthed, and I followed through with that choice. The next day, I took some time off in the afternoon and met with them at the farm office. I informed them about the bank account and presented them with the incriminating photos of my wife. It was crucial to present all the evidence before them. My parents were utterly bewildered when confronted with the proof, unable to believe their own eyes. They were deeply disturbed and shocked by the revelation, seemingly even more so than I was. They inquired about my intentions. I disclosed my plan to confront Connie and, if the allegations proved true, initiate divorce proceedings. While they understood my decision, my mother advised me to give Connie an opportunity to explain herself and to carefully consider my actions beforehand. After dinner, I accompanied Connie to Bill's house, stating that I needed her assistance with cleaning and organizing. Once inside, I guided her to a seat and gently informed her that we needed to discuss something significant. I handed her a packet containing the bank statement and the photos of her. Initially, I requested her to examine the bank statement and asked whether she noticed anything unusual. Surprisingly, she didn't, only commenting on the substantial sum of money Bill had accumulated. Then, I asked her to read the statement aloud from the beginning. As she progressed, her voice trailed off upon reading the words "payable on death to Joe," our last name. She stared at me with a shocked expression, realizing she had been caught. She pondered aloud why Bill would do such a thing. It was at this moment that I finally asked if there was something she needed to confess. She vigorously shook her head at first, but I persisted and asked again if she was absolutely certain. Reluctantly, she confirmed her previous statement. Letting out a sigh, I handed her the photographs and watched as tears streamed down her face. She pleaded to explain herself, her voice choked with emotion. In response, I urged her to tell me her side of the story. Nervously, she rushed to the bathroom, where the sound of her vomiting reached my ears. 15 minutes later, she emerged and confessed her involvement with Bill 18 years ago. She admitted that the affair was a foolish and selfish choice, emphasizing that it only lasted a few weeks. Connie claimed she quickly realized her mistake and put an end to it. She assured me that since then, she had distanced herself from Bill and only interacted with him in the presence of other family members. Curious about Joe's paternity, I asked if he was Bill's biological son. With confidence, she said, "No, he is undoubtedly yours." Intrigued, I pressed for further certainty. She insisted, repeatedly affirming that Joe was mine, even if not biologically, because I had raised him. Her statements seemed contradictory, leaving me perplexed. Clarifying that our conversation was solely focused on her relationship with Bill, I remained firm despite her tearful pleas for forgiveness. Rising from my seat, I decided to leave, instructing her not to return home until she had composed herself and appeared presentable. I did not want our children to witness her in such distress, so I headed home while she arrived about an hour later. Although she persistently requested a conversation, I firmly stated that an appropriate time for that would come in the future. That night, we shared the same bed, but when she attempted to cuddle with me, I rejected her advances and made it clear that I did not wish to share the bed with her. In fact, I would not have even slept in the same room if it were up to me. Throughout the night, she silently wept, struggling to find rest. The next day, I used my paid time off to visit my parents in the main house. I informed them of Connie's confession, and once again, they were shocked by the revelation. I confirmed my intention to seek a divorce from Connie. When my mother inquired if divorce was truly what I wanted, I reluctantly admitted that it was not my preference. However, given what I had learned, I could no longer trust her and had no desire for any physical intimacy with her. After the meeting with my parents, I returned home and confronted Connie, expressing my desire for a divorce. She completely broke down, overwhelmed with emotions. She pleaded with me, emphasizing that the affair had occurred a long time ago. Insisting that Joe was my son, she begged me to reconsider. Once again, I firmly stated that Joe was not the central focus of our discussion. My love for him remained unchanged, regardless of his biological father. I made it clear that the betrayal was solely between her and me, and the timing of it was irrelevant. Whether it had happened 18 years ago or centuries ago, the gravity of her betrayal remained the same. Later that day, I arranged a meeting with our regular attorney, who primarily handled farm-related matters. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, he recommended a divorce attorney who happened to be a close acquaintance. Wasting no time, I scheduled an appointment with the divorce attorney for that same afternoon, initiating the legal proceedings. The attorney assured me that the farm and its 3 houses, all integral parts of the corporation, would not be at risk during the settlement, providing some comfort amidst the chaos. Despite the infidelity, the attorney explained that our remaining assets would still be divided equally. This was possible because my parents had wisely organized the farm as a corporation, foreseeing unfortunate circumstances like this. By appointing themselves as the sole officers, they had safeguarded against potential fallout from situations involving ownership in the farm, such as divorce. The attorney clarified that my wife did not have any ownership rights to the farm due to its corporate structure. However, considering her lack of employment outside the home, I might be required to provide spousal support for at least 5 years, and possibly longer. Even in cases of infidelity, spousal support was mandatory. A somewhat surprising aspect of the laws that predominantly favored women, as he pointed out. Although challenging this in court was an option, his past experience with similar cases indicated that his assessment was likely to be the expected outcome. I had anticipated and prepared for this possibility. Money was not my main concern. My primary goal was simply to end the marriage. Upon returning home, I broke the news to Connie, and she completely lost control. She cried and pleaded for a second chance, but I repeatedly refused. I informed her that I would be talking to the children over the weekend. I mentioned that I would speak with Joe first, one-on-one, and then gather all the children, including Joe, to inform them. Connie asked if she could be present during these discussions, but I firmly declined. However, I did tell her that she could meet with them afterward if she wished. On Saturday morning, I approached Joe and let him know that there was something important we needed to discuss. We walked to the creek on our farm, where there was a pavilion and picnic benches. In that peaceful setting, I shared the news with him. As expected, he was devastated and filled with worry. In his distress, he asked if I would still love him if he wasn't my biological son. I reassured him, letting him know that my love for him would remain strong regardless of his biological ties. I firmly told him not to dwell on it, emphasizing that it would not change my relationship with him or with any of his siblings. I made it clear that this was an issue between his mother and me, and he and his siblings were not at fault. I went on to explain that I would be divorcing his mother, emphasizing that it was solely because of her affair with Uncle Bill and had nothing to do with him or his actions. We spent a couple of hours sitting and talking. I let him know that the next step would be to gather his siblings and have a conversation with them. Sensing his need for some time to prepare, he requested it, and I agreed without hesitation. I assured him that he could take all the time he needed to feel comfortable with the situation. Back at the house, we maintained a facade of normalcy. Although my wife's behavior had noticeably changed, the children didn't seem to notice as we spent most of the afternoon relaxing by the pool. We played games like cornhole and toss the frisbee, creating the illusion of a typical summer weekend for our family. However, beneath the surface, a dark secret loomed, waiting to be revealed. After dinner, Joe approached me and expressed his readiness to speak to his siblings. Unfortunately, they all had plans with their friends that evening, so we decided to postpone the discussion until the following morning. The next day, we all woke up early, had breakfast together, and attended Sunday services as a united family. When we returned home from church, I gathered the children and informed them that I needed to speak to them privately. On the back patio, my daughter inquired if their mother would be present, and I told her that she wouldn't be with us at that moment, but would meet with them later. This immediately unsettled the kids. With a heavy heart, I shared the news with them, and it was difficult to witness their reactions. As expected, they initially seemed disbelieving, then became angry, and eventually sadness settled in. I then explained my intention to divorce their mother, and tears welled up in their eyes. We had a lengthy conversation, delving into the details of the situation, and eventually, they came to understand and accept my decision. My daughter, overwhelmed by emotions, expressed her strong dislike for her mother and her desire to sever ties with her. I reminded each of them that they were young adults and had the freedom to handle the situation in their own way. However, I advised them to consider their mother's perspective and not rush into decisions solely based on this one incident. I encouraged them to think carefully and remember all the positive moments they had shared with her, because she was still their loving mother. After learning about the situation, they all acknowledged that their relationship with their mother had been good, but they understandably felt upset, and none of them immediately wanted to meet with her. To seek clarity, I suggested doing DNA tests for each of them. I made it explicit that their mother had admitted to a brief involvement with Uncle Bill, but I intended to have the tests primarily for my own peace of mind and to address any doubts. I assured them that regardless of the outcome of the DNA tests, whether they were biologically mine or not, my love for them would remain unchanged because they were legally my children. Later that evening, their mother joined them in the dining room for an emotionally charged conversation. Although I was not in the room, I overheard fragments of their discussion. Ultimately, the children expressed their love for their mother. However, their perception of her had been permanently altered, and it seemed unlikely that they would ever fully forgive her for what she had done to me and our family. This news was devastating for my wife, even though it was the consequence she deserved. After that night, my ex-wife and I decided to sleep in separate rooms until our divorce was finalized, which ended up taking almost 8 long months. Despite her daily pleas for me to reconsider and attend marriage counseling, I remained resolute in my decision. However, 3 months after our divorce, an unexpected offer came in from a developer interested in purchasing both our family home and the adjacent 80 acres of land. The monetary value of the offer was quite substantial, ultimately leading my parents and me to make a practical business decision and accept it. As a result, my ex-wife, our two youngest children, and I had to relocate 60 days later. During this time, my ex-wife found a 3-bedroom apartment in town to move into. Unfortunately, the harsh reality of our new situation hit her deeply, plunging her into a severe depression. She required multiple medications for treatment, and I temporarily moved back into my parents' home to support her. It was during this period that an opportunity arose for me to pursue my long-held dream of building my own home on the farmland. Teaming up with an architect, we meticulously designed a beautiful mid-sized log cabin with 3 bedrooms. Once construction was completed, I moved into this dream house with my 2 youngest children, who still spend a few nights a week with their mother. While my ex-wife continues to battle her depression, there are slight signs of improvement. She expresses a desire to reconcile, but I have no interest in reigniting our relationship. Nevertheless, I treat her with respect and empathy. Interestingly, discovering her affair completely extinguished any lingering affection I had for her, and I now feel bound to her out of obligation rather than love. Our conversations now center mainly around our children, as I strive to minimize unnecessary interaction. Although she betrayed my trust, she has no one else here besides our family, so I cannot completely cut her off. I still feel a responsibility towards her. Thankfully, the DNA test results confirmed that all my children are biologically mine, bringing immense relief after the turmoil and sleepless nights it caused. However, this revelation does not alter my feelings towards my ex-wife. The profound betrayal she inflicted upon me remains unforgivable, and I will never fully forget or forgive her. I still can't comprehend why Bill set up that account with Joe as the beneficiary. My ex-wife insists they never discussed paternity, and I am inclined to believe her on this matter. Nonetheless, it is peculiar that Bill would make such a decision without any clear reason. Maybe he assumed something, or perhaps he wanted Joe to be his child. Despite this ongoing uncertainty, I am content with my current situation and the relationship I have with my children. Rebuilding trust with my ex-wife may never happen, but I genuinely wish for her to find happiness in her life. At the age of 51, I hold the position of assistant manager at a large warehouse complex, while my 54-year-old ex-wife works as a real estate agent in Tampa, Florida. She takes care of her 2 college-age children, and I do not have any children of my own. Destiny brought us together a decade ago at a business convention, and we have been together ever since. Our shared interests include traveling, going to the beach, and spending time with family, making a positive impact on others' lives and contributing to society through activities like volunteering at soup kitchens and organizing food drives for those in need are deeply important to us. Although my ex-wife is socially active and frequently attends events and spends time with her girlfriends, our intimate life together has been satisfying. However, I occasionally felt uneasy about her tendency to excessively flirt with men in positions of authority. I distinctly remember an incident at a real estate event when she engaged in what I perceived as inappropriate flirting with a real estate developer. I voiced my concerns, and while she explained that most of her interactions were work-related and eventually apologized, doubts about her sincerity remained. Over time, her outings with friends became more frequent, resulting in longer absences from home. She assured me that her group consisted of her and 3 other women with varying marital statuses. In general, I have always been someone who trusts completely until proven otherwise, and this trust extended to my ex-wife as well. One evening after work, my wife called and mentioned bringing dinner home while unknowingly having me on speakerphone. Background noise indicated the presence of 2 other women in the car with her. During the conversation, one of the women asked if I was joining them for a trip to Miami. This took me by surprise, and I asked my wife who she was talking to. She explained the woman was addressing me. Despite my confusion, I replied, "No, I'll likely be occupied with work." Despite my confusion, I replied, "No, I'll likely be occupied with work." Later, when my wife returned home, we had a heated argument about her uncommunicated plans to travel to Miami. She claimed it was a last-minute decision and that she was going to inform me, but her friend revealed it prematurely. My wife informed me that they visited a bar, and one of her friends had too much to drink. Her work as a real estate agent involved interactions with various people, exploring different neighborhoods, active participation in community activities, and offering help to others. However, as previously mentioned, she had a penchant for flirting. Her job as a real estate agent earned her an annual income of over $120,000, while my own earnings were approximately $40,000, significantly less than hers. It's important to note that it took her several years to reach her current income level. She invested heavily in preparing for her trip to Miami, spending a substantial sum on clothing, despite already having an extensive wardrobe. A few days later, she left for Miami, which was only a 4.5-hour drive from Tampa, planning to stay for 4 days. However, on the second day of her absence, when I returned home from work around 7 p.m., something unexpected occurred. There was a distinct knock on the door, and a man in a formal suit stood there, holding a large manila envelope. He addressed me by name, handed me the envelope, and said, "This is for you." Afterward, he left. Upon opening the envelope, I found a note with a contact phone number and the words, "Contact me if you would like to discuss the photos." As I gazed at the first photo, it showed my wife seated on a man's lap, engaged in a passionate kiss with his hands on her back. They appeared to be in some sort of nightclub. The second photo depicted a scene by a pool where my wife and a man were sharing a passionate kiss. At this point, I decided to call the phone number provided on the note. During our conversation, I learned that the man was a private investigator who had been hired by another husband suspicious of his wife's infidelity. His job involved gathering information about the social circle of the client's wife. Upon closer examination of the pictures, I came across 3 more photos that clearly showed bad moments between my wife and the same man. In that moment, a mix of anger, frustration, and heartache overwhelmed me, causing tears to well up. I called my dad and recounted the recent events to him. He advised me to regain my composure and strongly recommended that I refrain from revealing anything to her. I assured my father that I would remain calm and not utter a word. With just 1 day left before my wife's return from her trip, I consulted with an attorney online. During our discussion, I openly shared the situation and explained that I had evidence of my wife's infidelity. Unfortunately, I was told that in Florida, it doesn't matter because it's a no-fault state. The attorney then asked how long we had been married, to which I replied that it had been over a decade. My plan was to hire a lawyer the next day while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy at home. However, when my wife returned from her trip, it unintentionally disrupted my well-thought-out plan as she had 2 days off. So, I had to delay my plan for a while. On the 3rd day, she returned to work, and I left the house after her. While she was away, I reached out to my father and Kenny for financial assistance to cover my attorney fees, and they agreed to help. I hired a lawyer and instructed them to start divorce proceedings, citing irreconcilable differences as the reason. Afterward, I packed my belongings, and with my father's assistance, I moved most of my stuff to his apartment using his truck. However, I hadn't yet moved in with him. I intended to stay until my wife was officially served with the divorce papers. 2 weeks passed, and surprisingly, she hadn't been informed. Another week went by and she was finally served with the divorce papers while at work. Following this, my phone began receiving messages from her, including questions like, "What's going on?" I was at home that day when my ex-spouse from Sunibi called me. I asked my father to be present in our house since I didn't trust her, and he arrived just 5 minutes before her. As soon as she walked in, she immediately inquired why I had filed for divorce and what had prompted my decision. I pulled out the pictures from my bag and showed them to her, explaining that these were the reasons behind my divorce filing. She was shocked, covered her mouth, tears welled up, and she attempted to apologize. At that point, I no longer wanted to see her and told her that we would meet in court. As expected, she bombarded my phone with calls and texts, suggesting options like marriage counseling before the divorce hearing. She hired an attorney who did everything possible to contest the process. My attorney mounted a strong defense, resulting in a favorable outcome for me. I received $60,000 in equity from the subsequent house sale as well as $1,900 per month in spousal support for 3 years. We divided the furniture, but I chose to give it to her. About a month later, I learned that my ex-wife had cheated on me before, though I was unaware of it. One of her close friends had considered telling me about the affair, but felt it wasn't her place. Later, she expressed regret for not disclosing it and apologized. I responded that if I had known about the affair, I might not have been married to her for a decade. -1 months have passed since my divorce, and during this time, my ex-wife has sent me text messages almost every week, inquiring about my well-being. However, I've decided not to respond. I've maintained my phone number, choosing not to change it because it's my prerogative. Even when she mentioned that her children were curious about me in one of her messages, it didn't prompt me to respond. The pain from this situation lingers, but I'm fortunate to have supportive friends who avoid discussing that tumultuous period. I'm on a healing journey and have recently started therapy sessions. Despite the heartache, I'm confident that I'll be okay in the end.